Straight ahead, expanded offer. Texas Land Commissioner Dawn Buckingham announces a new initiative to further help President-elect Donald Trump carry out his mass deportation plan. Race for the gavel. Texas House Republicans will gather as a caucus to select who they think should be their next speaker. Former Governor Rick Perry tells me Speaker Dave Phelan already has the votes to be reelected, while Republican Representative Richard Hayes, who once supported Phelan, tells me he now supports his challenger, David Cook. One-on-one, Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Dallas speaks with us about her priorities in the new Congress and shares her concerns about the Trump mass deportation policy. Good morning, I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts now. Hello and welcome to Eye on Politics. Hope you're having a great Thanksgiving holiday weekend. We begin with the state of Texas increasing its support for President-elect Donald Trump's mass deportation plan. That pledge came this past week on the same day Trump's incoming border czar said Texas efforts to secure the border are a model for the rest of the country.
Our offer has been extended beyond this property.
Texas Land Commissioner Dawn Buckingham appeared at the state's newly acquired 1,400-acre property in Starr County along the southern border that she offered to the incoming Trump administration to carry out their new mass deportation policy. Buckingham announced the state's additional support while standing with the mother and grandmother of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungary, who was murdered earlier this year in Houston, allegedly by two members of a Venezuelan gang who entered the U.S. illegally.
The new project that the General Land Office is going to embark in that I have created is the Jocelyn Initiative, in which we will locate appropriate land under my jurisdiction to lease for the construction of violent criminal deportation facilities.
As Buckingham made her announcement to offer more state land to the federal government, the state was putting up new sections of a border wall on its new property. She said the prior owner wouldn't allow law enforcement on her ranch, and so the property was among the top spots in the state for human and drug trafficking.
Let me be clear, there is going to be a mass deportation.
At another event along the southern border, Tom Homan, the incoming border czar for President-elect Trump, praised Governor Greg Abbott, along with Texas state troopers and members of the Texas National Guard, for their efforts to secure the border and crack down on illegal immigration and drugs.
We're going to help Governor Abbott finish the job he started, but this is a model we can take across the country. Unprecedented success.
Americans, thank you for your service.
The governor and Homan served the troopers and National Guard members a Thanksgiving meal to show their gratitude.
People outside the state of Texas, they know exactly what you've done, the difference that you've made.
There are more than 1.4 million people who have reportedly been given final deportation orders by an immigration judge. As part of his effort, the president-elect announced that on his first day back in office, he will sign an executive order to impose new tariffs on goods imported from Mexico, Canada, and China. Sarah Jenkins reports on what this can mean to you in this week's brief.
When President-elect Trump announced the plan for tariffs, he said that, quote, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before, and the tariffs would remain in place until drugs, particularly fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stopped the invasion of our country. The U.S. is the largest importer of goods in the world, with Mexico, China, and Canada its top three suppliers, according to the most recent census data. The proposed tariffs would mean an additional 25% for Mexico and Canada and 10% for China. Some experts warn, if implemented, the tariffs could dramatically raise prices on everything from gas to electronics to avocados to cars. In response, China said no one will win a trade war, and Mexico's president suggested the country could retaliate with tariffs of its own.
Thanks, Sarah. Mr. Trump announced more Texans who will be serving in his cabinet if confirmed by the U.S. Senate. The first Texan already announced was John Ratcliffe, who will serve as CIA director. He's from Rockwall County and served as director of national intelligence during Trump's first term. Ratcliffe is also a former U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Texas, which includes Collin and Denton counties. Last weekend, Trump announced Scott Turner will serve as his HUD secretary. Turner worked for Trump during the first administration as a policy advisor, and he's a former state representative from Rockwall and parts of Collin County. And Brooke Rollins will be the new agriculture secretary. She grew up in Glen Rose and also worked as a policy advisor during Trump's first term. Rollins tweeted that her family and home in Fort Worth were threatened, but that they are okay after a quick police response. And a new Texan, Elon Musk, will serve in the Department of Government Efficiency, which is not a government agency, along with former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, to advise the White House on how to cut federal government spending. Coming up, the Texas Speaker's race. We'll hear from former Governor Rick Perry, who supports Dade Phelan's bid for re-election, and a North Texas Republican who supports Phelan's challenger, David Cook, when Eye on Politics returns. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Now to the Texas Speaker's race, which heats up later this week. On Saturday, the House GOP caucus will gather at the Capitol to decide who they think should become the next Speaker, either Dade Phelan, who's running again, or Representative David Cook of Mansfield. Former Governor Rick Perry is set to work for Phelan if he becomes Speaker again next session. And Perry told me there is no doubt in his mind this will happen.
He's going to be the Speaker. I think it's rather interesting that we're even having a conversation about whether Dade Phelan is going to be the Speaker. I can count. He's got 76 votes. Would he rather have the vast majority of the people who are Republicans out voting for him? Yes. But when you look at the choices, Dade Phelan is going to be the Speaker. He's got the votes already. So I guess just for fun, people want to talk about, well, how about this person or how about that person, or we're going to go into the caucus and pick somebody else. No, I can count. Dade has the votes to be elected Speaker. So any conversations that are out there about who's going to be the Speaker, I guess it's an interesting exercise, but Dade Phelan's got the votes.
Well, why are you so confident? I know you said you can count, but I mean, because on December 7th, as you know, the House GOP caucus is going to be meeting. And I know the magic number on January 14th, the first day of the session, is 76. That's when the final vote will take place. But there are going to be 88 Republican House members, right? So he doesn't need any. I mean, technically, you shouldn't have to need any Democrats, right?
And I think that is the fallacy of that statement that you just made, Jack, with all due respect. You do need Democrats. The idea that you're going to just say, hey, we don't need your help. Thank you. We're going to go do this ourselves. Number one, that's not the Texan way to do things. That's the Washington way to do things. And we don't want to end up like Washington, D.C., where everybody's got their little badge that they wear. I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, and we're not ever going to work with each other. Matter of fact, we're going to be at war with each other. Anyone who stands up and says, vote for me for Speaker, I'm not going to have a Democrat as a chairman, I think is incredibly short-sighted. Because at some point in time, you're going to need those individuals. Let's say a constitutional amendment, which requires 100 votes. 88 is not 100. So the idea that you're going to sit there and shun the Democratic Party for political purposes to make some group happy that you're more pure than anybody else is incredibly short-sighted and not good for Texas. So my message to every member of the legislature is, look, Dade Phelan's going to get elected Speaker because there are probably 30 at least that would walk over broken glass for Dade, and 40 plus Democrats join them, and you got 76. So I can count. Dade's going to be the Speaker, and we just need to kind of get over this purity test that seems to be playing out there in some areas of the Republican Party, that we're not going to have any conversation with Democrats. We're going to shun them. We're going to put them in a little closet back at the back. And, they can come out for ceremonial purposes, but their votes don't matter. That is short-sighted. That is not good for Texas. And the good news is it's not going to happen.
Do you see a scenario based on what you just said in which Speaker Phelan has more Democrats supporting him than Republicans to retain the gavel. And why do you think that is? And what does that
Well,
say?
I don't think that'll be the case, Jack. I think that he will have the majority of the Republicans in the caucus voting for him when they have the public vote on the House floor.
Speaker Phelan has had a very difficult relationship with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. And the Lieutenant Governor has continued to be out there on social media very critical of Speaker Phelan. So if the Speaker does retain the gavel, how is anything going to get done between both houses? And do you worry about that?
I don't particularly worry about it. I understand politics. I understand choosing sides, but I also know Dan Patrick, and I truly believe he has the best interest of the state in mind. And once the contest is over with, we're going to go work together and try to find the solutions to the issues that are important to the state.
Perry insists some Democrats should still be allowed to be committee chairs. We also spoke with Republican Representative Richard Hayes of Hickory Creek in Denton County. 2 years ago, Hayes supported Phelan, but now he's among the 47 Republicans who've publicly backed Representative Cook. And he tells me there's little to no path for Phelan to win in the GOP caucus.
When we meet on December the 7th, under the RPT platform, Republican Party of Texas platform, and then under our House Republican caucus rules, they contemplate that the caucus will come up with a nominee. That was in the platform. We adopted that a couple of sessions ago. And the theory is we stay there until we come up with a consensus choice so that the Republicans are choosing the Speaker, since we're the majority party. And then knowing that you have a majority vote, then you take it to the House floor. Specifically under our caucus rules, the rules contemplate a 60% of the 88 or 53. So we can get to 53 votes in any candidate. That will be the caucus nominee. And then our bylaws further provide that whoever the caucus nominee is, everybody agrees to support that particular candidate. So for arguments purposes, we're really looking at 53 for December the 7th.
Whoever has the 53 votes on December 7th should be selected as Speaker.
That'll be the next Speaker. Yes, sir.
I spoke with former Governor Rick Perry, who told me that Speaker Phelan, who he supports, has the votes. And he said that he knows how to count. So what do you say to that?
Well, of course, I have great admiration for former Governor Perry. I would say that we know David has 47 that have come out publicly for him, and maybe about 12 have come out publicly for Dade Phelan. I would say I don't see a pathway for Phelan to make it to 53. With 47, which is more than half of the 88 caucus, the pathway really is there for David Cook, and I feel pretty encouraged that, in fact, he will be the nominee coming out of the caucus.
And one thing that Governor Perry told me, and others who support Speaker Phelan have told me, is that Texas had very conservative sessions. You said that yourself, had very conservative sessions, and that would continue under Phelan. And they also say that Republicans still need Democrats because to pass any constitutional amendment, there needs to be 100 in the House, and there are only 88 Republicans. So what do you say to those arguments?
Well, it is true. It requires 100 under our Constitution. So we don't have a super majority where we can just by fiat deem what's going to happen. The reality, Jack, is that about 80% of our legislation that we pass is nonpartisan. It doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. If we're building a new highway, or we're putting in a new water source, or broadband in rural Texas, those are nonpartisan issues. So that leaves then about 20% of our legislation that is. But the reality is we're a Republican state. We have a Republican governor, lieutenant governor. We'll have a Republican speaker. The people elected us to govern with our philosophy and to not abdicate that to the Democrats.
There's been a lot of back and forth between Speaker Phelan and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. And if Speaker Phelan does retain the gavel, my question to you is, how concerned are you that the back and forth between them will impact what gets done in Austin?
I think that's a fair question, Jack, because I think that has impacted some of our legislation. I think when we passed that out of the House, it's gone to the Senate and then met a instant death. I attribute some of that to that poor relationship. And I've talked to Dade about this, on working on improving your relationship with the Lieutenant Governor. But it could be that it is so fragmented that it would be very challenging to move forward. If we can't overcome the relationship, then that's a huge problem. We need to learn to work better together. And I just met with Lieutenant Governor last week, and part of the discussion of that is how do we improve the relationship between the House and the Senate.
And what did he tell you?
He said he's working on it, and he's hopeful that we will overcome those issues, and he's also hopeful that we'll have a new speaker.
Hayes said he wants the GOP caucus, not the Speaker, to have more say on which bills should be pushed through House committees. Even after the House GOP caucus decides this Saturday who their next Speaker should be, the final vote by Republicans and Democrats will take place Tuesday, January 14th, which is the first day of the next legislative session, and whoever gets 76 votes wins. Democrat Ana Maria Ramos is also running. Coming up next, Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Dallas speaks about her priorities and her concerns on the Trump mass deportation policy. When Eye on Politics comes right back. Now our one-on-one interview with Dallas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. We asked her about her concerns over the planned Trump mass deportation policy and her priorities in the new Congress.
It's something that I'm used to dealing with. If you recall, I was constantly dealing with the trifecta down in Austin. I will tell you that our senior senator has been a great partner in this Congress, with the Democrats controlling the Senate and obviously the Republicans controlling the House. And so I think some of our legislation around things such as fentanyl and making sure that we can be smarter about saving lives, I think that that is legislation that we will continue to be able to push forward with. It is my hope that some of these other kind of yearly things that we have to do, that hopefully there won't be too much disagreement. Obviously, we have tried to thwart a government shutdown over and over and over. And as we've been able to get those budgets passed, I've been able to deliver on bringing home money to the district in the form of community project funding. So it is my hope that we can continue that. And that means that I can basically have a lot more leeway over directing funds to spaces that I know truly, truly need them and will make a direct impact, specifically in Texas 30. So it is my hope that we can do that around funding.
Let me ask you about something that a lot of people think is going to impact Texas directly, which is about President-elect Trump's mass deportation plan. What's your thought about this, and what are your concerns?
Yeah, my concerns are around our economy. As people, as you know, Jack, I was traveling the entire country as I was campaigning for Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. And I would hear from people that would say it's really hard to think about continuing on this path, as they would talk about the inflation. And it really was very difficult to explain to them that inflation was global. It was not just limited to the United States, and that the United States had actually recovered a lot quicker and better. But more importantly, I would have to engage in these conversations where I would say, please raise your hand if you are raising the next generation of farmers, and no one would raise their hand. And I would have to connect the dots for them and say, who is it that you think is actually farming the land if you are not raising the next generation of farmers? It is these immigrants that are coming to our country, and they're contributing to our economy, which is keeping the cost of food down. Or when we talk about housing, because I can tell you that housing was actually the number one issue that people would talk about, whether it was renting or whether it was the ability to actually buy. It was housing. And so talking to people and asking them, well, who is it that you think is coming in that is helping to build these these homes. And so it is a matter of connecting the dots. And if people want to understand why immigrants matter, just remember that we are a country of immigrants. And that is what's truly made us great in this country. Now, when it comes to criminality, I think that we should be fighting to rule out criminality, whether it's coming from those that were born right here in the United States or those that were born outside of this country. This will cost us more than it will benefit us.
And you had mentioned it before. You are one of the main surrogates for Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz. And I'm wondering, how surprised were you just by the election results?
I was extremely shocked. I knew that this was going to be a close election. I did not know that it would skew that way for every single swing state. You couldn't have told me that that was going to happen.
You can watch all our full interviews on our website, cbsnewstexas.com. Just go to the Eye on Politics section. And that's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening to you at CBS News Texas. See you next week. Enjoy your weekend.